Picture this. It's the summer of 1940, and Britain is, well, on the brink of complete annihilation. Now, we all know the stories, right? The heroic pilots, those iconic Spitfires. But what if I told you the real secret to victory wasn't just a machine or a man? It was this revolutionary system of information, a system that totally changed the game for air combat. So let's dig into how this system actually worked and why it was so incredibly crucial.
Yeah, the jaws of the Nazi whale were set to swallow Jonah. That really captures the sheer terror of 1940, doesn't it? Germany's blitzkrieg had just steamrolled across Europe, and Britain, now standing completely alone, was next on the list. I mean, the situation looked absolutely hopeless.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Royal Air Force, the RAF, was just battered. They were short on pilots, and they were facing the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, which was way bigger and had a lot more experience. On paper, they should have been wiped from the sky. So how on earth did they pull off the impossible?
Okay, to really get a sense of this miracle, we first have to understand just how bad things were. The scale of the disaster was immense. By the middle of 1940, Britain's position was frankly almost indefensible.
Just look at how fast everything fell apart. You have the British Army just rescued from Dunkirk, but they had to leave pretty much all their heavy equipment, tanks, artillery, everything behind on the beaches. Then their main ally, France, surrenders. And just a few weeks after that, Hitler gives the green light for Operation Sea Lion, the full-scale invasion of Britain. The clock was ticking, big time.
So you can imagine, the stakes just could not have been any higher. The Germans knew before a single invasion barge could cross the English Channel, they had to do one thing: completely destroy the RAF and get total control of the skies. Everything, and I mean everything, was riding on this coming air battle.
Right, so here's the core problem for the RAF. It wasn't just about having enough planes, it was about how they used them. They'd taken such a beating in the Battle of France that they literally could not afford to waste a single drop of fuel or risk a single pilot on a pointless patrol. They had to make sure that when they sent their fighters up, they were going to find the enemy. Every single time.
Well, as luck would have it, one man had been thinking about this exact problem for years, and that man was the head of RAF Fighter Command, Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding. He wasn't just a commander, he was an architect, a systems builder. And this is so important to understand. The Dowding system wasn't some newfangled plane or secret weapon. It was a network. It was a way of gathering, processing, and then sharing intelligence in real time. The whole idea was to turn the entire coastline of Britain into one giant, invisible tripwire.
What's so brilliant about this is how Dowding put it all together. He took the basic ideas from Britain's old World War I air defenses, visual spotters on the ground with telephones, and then he had this total light bulb moment. He realized that this brand new, almost experimental technology called radar was the missing piece of the puzzle that could make the whole thing work on a massive national scale.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How did this incredible information machine actually work? Let's break it down piece by piece.
It was basically a 5-step assembly line for information. It started with raw data and ended with RAF fighters showing up in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. So, first, detection, and last, interception. Let's walk through each step.
Okay, step 1, radar. This was the chain home system. Think of these huge lattice towers dotted all along the coast. They could actually spot Luftwaffe planes as they were gathering over France, which gave the RAF this priceless gift of early warning. We're talking sometimes up to 20 minutes, which is an eternity in air combat.
But here's the catch. The radar back then had a massive blind spot. It couldn't see over land. So once the German planes crossed the coast, the tech was basically useless. And this is where the human element becomes absolutely vital. Thousands of civilian volunteers in the Observer Corps, just regular people with binoculars and basic instruments, would visually track the planes, phoning in every detail, their position, how high they were, and how many there were.
Okay, so you've got all this raw, sometimes chaotic information pouring in from the radar stations in the Observer Corps. Where does it all go? It goes to the most critical part of the entire operation, a central hub called the filter room. This was the brain. This is where teams of plotters took in dozens of potentially conflicting reports and somehow turned it all into one single, clear picture of the battle as it unfolded.
And this quote just nails what they were doing. The filter room acted like a sieve. It shook out all the noise, all the duplicate reports, all the mistakes, and what was left was only the essential, actionable intelligence.
It created a clear track for each enemy formation, and that track was updated every few minutes. That essential detail was then passed down the command chain to the airfields that would scramble the fighters.
So that's the system. But how did it actually perform when the pressure was on? Well, for the Luftwaffe, the results were absolutely devastating.
What it created was a pure information war, and only one side could actually see the battlefield. The RAF knew exactly where the enemy was, how many planes there were, and what direction they were headed. The Luftwaffe, on the other hand, was flying completely blind. They kept flying into ambushes, and that critical element of surprise, gone. You know, this quote from the German pilots really says it all. Their own intelligence kept telling them the RAF is finished, they're down to their last few planes, and yet on every single raid, RAF fighters would just appear out of nowhere to meet them. It became this dark joke among the German air crews. Oh, here come the last 50 Spitfires again. They just couldn't figure out how the RAF always knew where they were going to be.
And all of this came to a head on September 15, 1940. The Germans were convinced the RAF was broken, so they launched their biggest, most concentrated attack of the whole battle. They sent over 1,500 aircraft to try and smash London once and for all.
On that one day, which we now call Battle of Britain Day, the system worked to perfection. The RAF met every single wave of the attack, and they inflicted crippling losses. The Luftwaffe was just shattered by the experience. And get this, just 2 days later, a totally stunned Hitler postponed the invasion of Britain until further notice. It was off. It would never be back on.
So what's the big takeaway here? What was the ultimate significance of this incredible defensive victory? Why do we still talk about it as one of the most crucial turning points of the entire Second World War?
Well, the legacy is just immense. First, and most obviously, it stopped the invasion, an invasion that would have almost certainly meant the defeat of Britain. It also completely shattered the myth that the Luftwaffe was invincible. And maybe most importantly, it kept Britain in the fight, making sure it could be that unsinkable aircraft carrier where the Allies would later stage the D-Day landings to liberate Europe.
And really, that's the bottom line. The Battle of Britain wasn't the victory that won the war, but it was the victory that made winning possible. By surviving that darkest hour, Britain made sure that the Allies still had a chance.
That system, doubting system, it guaranteed the Luftwaffe couldn't get the air superiority they needed to invade. It was the razor-thin margin between survival and total defeat. Which leaves us with one last, pretty chilling thought. What if it had failed? What if that amazing network of towers, volunteers, and plotters hadn't been enough?